Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For 3 decades, I have worked in the trenches of the pharmaceutical and medical world. As a medical technologist and a pharmaceutical chemist, my career has been defined by rigorous standards, meticulous testing, and an unwavering attention to detail. I've spent my life in environments where the identity and purity of every single analyte under study was specified precisely, fully validated, and scrutinized to the nth degree. But 3 years ago, my professional world collided with my personal life in a way that I never expected. I was sick. I had a long list of chronic medical conditions that weren't responding to any treatments, and I was, at my heaviest, 100 pounds overweight. My doctors, every one of them, had no answers. They could treat the symptoms. Well, sometimes they could treat the symptoms, but they couldn't solve the problem. Out of desperation, I started doing my own research. I decided to try something radical, the carnivore diet. I eliminated everything but meat, and what happened next was nothing short of a miracle. The weight started to fall off, and within months, all of my medical conditions had resolved themselves, some in as little as 3 days. It felt too good to be true. I was astounded. This personal transformation ignited a fire inside of me. I began to ask a question that, in hindsight, seemed so obvious. If eliminating the vast majority of foods and their ingredients healed me, then what exactly was I eating that was making me sick? My professional background in the FDA-regulated pharmaceutical industry gave me the tools to investigate the answer. And what I found is truly disturbing. Today, I'm going to expose the truth about how our food is regulated. I'll show you a system that's supposed to protect us, one originally built on trust and safety, that's been completely corrupted by loopholes, conflicts of interest, and a shocking lack of oversight. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this broken system right here on Carnivore Science Channel. Most people believe that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, are the ultimate honorable guardians of our food supply, the shining beacons of scientific integrity that we're all supposed to trust with our health. At least, that's the story that we've been told. The FDA is a U.S. government agency within the Department of Health and Human Services. Its job is to protect public health by regulating everything from drugs and medical devices to food and cosmetics. On paper, this is a noble mission as they review products, enforce laws, and order recalls when necessary. An additional and far more telling fact is that the FDA is notoriously known for its revolving door, where top executives from major pharmaceutical companies seamlessly transition into powerful positions within the FDA and then back again, all while pretending to be impartial guardians of our health. The USDA is a federal department focused on agriculture and nutrition. While they oversee the safety of meat, poultry, and egg products, their primary function is to promote and support American agriculture. Think about that for a hot minute. This dual role, they're both the industry's head cheerleader while simultaneously trying to regulate it? What could possibly go wrong? Corruption in government. I know you're thinking, what a shock. But do you really understand the depth of this particular part of the swamp? Probably not, because most people hear the word regulatory and they think that means safe. Well, this is where the devil's in the details, and reality is light years away from perception. There are a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down to find corruption within a lot of these government agencies. But today, we're going to look at the reality of how the ingredients allowed in our food supply get there. How are these thousands of additives, preservatives, and chemicals, how are they actually approved? When a pharmaceutical company wants to get a new drug approved, they go through a grueling, years-long process. They file an application, they conduct extensive clinical trials with independent oversight, and submit mountains of data to the FDA. The burden of proof is on the manufacturer to prove the drug is safe and effective. It's a stringent process with an enormous price tag. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot wrong with this process as well, but we'll have to save that one for another video. The process for a new food additive is very, very different. And in my opinion, and many others, it's a total joke. There are two primary pathways for food ingredients to obtain approval. The first is the Food Additive Petition, or FAP. A food additive petition is a formal submission to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by a manufacturer or sponsor requesting approval for a substance to be used as a food additive or for a new use of an existing one. The FAP process requires detailed scientific evidence of the additive's safety and intended effect to ensure it's reasonably certain to be of no harm under the proposed conditions of use, thus protecting public health. The purpose of a food additive petition: pre-market approval. The FAP process ensures that new food additives undergo rigorous safety evaluations and scientific scrutiny before being introduced into the food supply. 2. Safety standard. The FDA must find that the substance is safe and will achieve its intended technical effect under the proposed use. 3. Establishment of use conditions. If a petition is approved, the FDA issues a regulation that details the conditions under which the additive may be safely used, including specifications on food types, maximum quantities, and other requirements. Elements of a food additive petition. According to the FDA's guidelines, the petition must contain extensive, scientifically backed evidence to demonstrate the additive is safe under its proposed conditions of use. And the giant red flag you're seeing is that they generate the data themselves. Key sections of the petition include: 1. Identity and composition. The full chemical name, CAS registry number, and other identifying information. For natural additives, the source must be specified. Side note: a CAS registry number is a unique numerical identifier for a specific chemical substance assigned by the Chemical Abstracts Service, CAS. These numbers eliminate confusion caused by multiple names for the same chemical, are universally recognized, and are used globally for regulatory compliance, scientific research, and chemical tracking in databases and safety data sheets. For instance, the CAS number for methanol, no matter where you purchase it or who the vendor is 67-56-1. 2. Manufacturing process. A detailed description of how the additive is made, including information on impurities, byproducts, and manufacturing controls. 3. Intended use and effect. The proposed use, the specific type of foods it will be added to, and its intended technical effect. For instance, as a preservative, a color, or a flavor. 4. Intake estimate. An estimate of how much of the additive consumers will likely be exposed to. Kind of a guess? 5. Analytical methods. Specific methods for detecting and quantifying the additive in food, along with validation data showing the method is accurate and reliable. Environmental assessment. an evaluation of the potential environmental impact of the additive's use and disposal. And finally, safety data. The most critical component is the full reports of all safety investigations, including toxicology studies and other scientific data demonstrating safety. So I want to go back to that safety data section for a moment, just so we're clear on this one point. Toxicology studies conducted for a food additive petition sometimes involve animal studies. The FDA does not require animal or human studies, but will review them if the petitioner, the company that wants the additive, submits them as part of their safety assessment. A kind of, I'll look at it if you've got it sort of approach, I guess. Some of their key points regarding the approval process are the emphasis that sound scientific judgment is important and paramount, and alternative methods or modified protocols can be proposed if supported by scientific arguments. That sounds very weaselly. I mean, there's a lot of weasel words in here. Alternative methods, modified protocols. They also iterate that the FDA's guidelines are recommendations, not rigid rules. And in addition, the agency has announced plans to reduce reliance on the animal testing in various areas, including the development of new food additives, and to accelerate the adoption of new human-relevant methods like AI and cell-based models. With regard to reducing animal studies, FDA has this stated as a goal that they want to reduce and potentially replace animal testing for both drug and food additive development. Now, I'm not the person who wants to test things on animals. I love animals, and I'm not that type of person where I'm all rah-rah, let's kill some mice. But if it's not going to be tested on humans and or animals, how do you know what it's going to do? Omnipotence? I don't know. And on the topic of animal studies, let's take a look at what type of safety data may be gathered if you do animal studies. These studies are the core of the toxicological evaluation, and they typically include the following: acute toxicity studies to determine the effects of a single high dose of the substance, subchronic toxicity studies. These are often in a rodent and a non-rodent species to evaluate potential adverse effects from repeated exposure. Long-term or chronic toxicity studies, which are used to find the highest dose that produces no adverse effects in animals, the no observed effect level, or NOEL. Reproductive, developmental, and neurotoxicity studies to evaluate specific potential risks. Metabolism and pharmacokinetic studies to understand how the body absorbs, distributes, and metabolizes and excretes the additive. Human studies are limited if performed at all, as they are generally not required for the food additive approval. However, the FDA may consider them when submitting for these purposes. If they're supplementing animal data, information from humans can actually be used to weigh to or address potential issues that are raised by the data from the animal studies. For high exposure additives, if a proposed additive is expected to be consumed by humans at a relatively high level, clinical human tolerance studies may be submitted. Not required, but submitted. For example, the petitioner for the sweetener Advantame had submitted human clinical studies to demonstrate its tolerability. Evaluating specific claims, the human clinical studies may be used to provide evidence for specific health benefits or efficacy claims associated with an ingredient. So the petition is then filed by the company that's seeking the additive approval with the FDA's Office of Food Additive Safety, OFAS, who then evaluates the scientific data to determine if the additive is safe for its intended use. The FDA's safety review of a food additive includes 1. Data submitted by the petitioner, including, if provided, animal toxicology studies. 2. FDA scientists review the data to ensure that the additive is safe under its proposed conditions of use. 3. An acceptable daily intake, ADI, is established based on NOEL from the most sensitive animal studies. The ADI includes a safety factor to protect against any uncertainties in extrapolating animal data to humans. It's important to understand what this ADI is referring to. It's acceptable daily intake, and it is the estimate of the amount of a substance, such as a food additive, a pesticide, or a contaminant, that can be consumed daily over a lifetime without posing a significant health risk. ADIs are typically calculated based on animal studies that determine the no observed adverse effect level, or NOAEL. The NOAEL is the highest dose of a substance that does not cause any observable adverse health effects in the test animals. The ADI is then calculated by dividing the NOAEL by a safety factor, which is usually between 100 and 1,000. This safety factor accounts for potential differences between animals and humans, as well as uncertainties in the data. The purpose and significance of the ADIs are used by regulatory agencies to establish safe limits for the presence of substances in food and drinking water. They provide a benchmark for assessing the potential health risk associated with chronic exposure to a substance. It's important to note that the ADIs are based on limited data and may not be accurate for all individuals or situations. Furthermore, the FDA weighs the estimated human dietary exposure against the established ADI to ensure there is no reasonable certainty of harm. Again, a lot of weasel words in here, especially since toxicology studies are not even really required. Some ADI examples are: the ADI for caffeine is 400 milligrams per day for adults, and the ADI for lead is 0.005 milligrams per kilogram per body weight per day for adults. After the FDA review has been completed, they either issue a regulation prescribing the conditions for safe use or deny the petition, providing reasons for the action. If approved, the conditions for use are published as a regulation in the Federal Register. Now, to someone who's not been in the bowels of the regulated products industry, all of this may sound really comprehensive and robust. As someone who has spent my career knee-deep in the FDA's regulations, I can see right through this system. One problem is all the weasel words within the regulations, such as guidelines and stringent, and the lack of clearly specified requirements, limits, or protocols. And the cherry on top of this shit sundae comes down to a conflict of interest, plain and simple. It is the company requesting the additive approval that is responsible for preparing all the data that's submitted to the FDA. Yeah, this is a giant red flag, as there is no neutral third party challenging or confirming results that are submitted, nor is there rigorous oversight of any kind on how the data was collected or how the studies were conducted. One really big factor to consider is the lack of time. More often than not, early testing and evaluation doesn't show harm. It takes time for some compounds to inflict damage. That's not just my opinion. We have clear historical examples to back this up. Numerous food additives that were once approved for human consumption have been removed or banned due to the evidence of them causing harm. These removals can occur at a federal level by the FDA or at a state level, and some additives allowed in the U.S. are banned in other countries. Here are some notable examples. Red dye number 3, erythrocene. Its initial use was a synthetic food dye used to give foods and drinks a bright cherry red color. It was commonly found in candies, cakes, frostings, and other processed foods. The reason for its removal were studies in the 1980s that showed a high dose of red number 3 caused thyroid cancer in male rats. The FDA banned its use in cosmetics and external drugs in 1990, but its use in food continued for many years. Following petitions and actions by states like California, the FDA recently moved to revoke its authorization for use in food and ingested drugs. 2. Brominated vegetable oil. A food additive used primarily in citrus-flavored beverages to prevent the flavoring from separating and floating to the top. The reason for removal is the FDA proposed a ban on BVO in 2023 after new studies conducted in collaboration with the National Institutes of Health found that it could have adverse health effects in humans. Many beverage companies had already removed BVO from their products due to the public pressure and concern. 3. Potassium bromate. Initial use was a flour additive used to strengthen dough and improve the texture of baked goods. Reason for removal was the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified potassium bromate as possibly carcinogenic to humans. It has been banned in many countries, including the European Union, China, and India. California was the first U.S. state to ban its use. 4. Propylparaben. Initial use was as a preservative used in foods like tortillas and muffins to prevent microbial growth and extend shelf life. Reason for removal, it has been linked to hormone disruption and is banned in the European Union. California also banned it as part of its Food Safety Act. Number 5, artificial flavorings. Initial use, certain synthetic flavoring agents were used to create specific tastes in food products. Reason for removal, the FDA has banned a number of artificial flavorings after they were found to cause cancer in animals. Examples include benzophenone, ethyl acetate, and styrene. Number 6, my personal favorite, Olestra. Initially, it was a calorie-free fat substitute used in snack foods like potato chips. Reason for removal, anal seepage. It was approved by the FDA, but it was later found to cause gastrointestinal issues, including cramps, gas, and loose stools. It also interfered with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, leading to a requirement for a warning label, anal seepage. While not fully banned, its use has significantly declined due to these known side effects and public concern. You would crap your pants. Number 7, trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils. Created through a process called hydrogenation, these fats were used to improve the shelf life and texture of many processed foods. They were initially classified as generally recognized as safe, GRAS, remember that. But the reason for removal is decades of scientific evidence showed that trans fats significantly increase the risk of heart disease. In 2015, the FDA determined that partially hydrogenated oils were no longer safe for human use in food, and food manufacturers were given a timeline to remove them from their products. While the food additive petition process reeks of conflicts of interest and regulation language that is largely made up of weasel words, the second food ingredient approval route is even more concerning. Enter the GRAS process. GRAS is an acronym for Generally Recognized as Safe, a legal category established by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for substances intended for use in food. A food ingredient is considered GRAS if its safety is generally recognized by qualified experts, either through scientific procedures or extensive common use in food prior to January 1st, 1958. This status allows companies to use certain ingredients without undergoing the full food additive approval process, though the process can involve submitting GRAS notifications to the FDA for review. In 1958, the Food Additives Amendment was passed, requiring new substances to be reviewed before they came to market. But it included a critical exception for substances that were generally recognized as safe by scientific experts, usually through historical use. To lawmakers at the time, this approach seemed to make sense. Then, in 1997, the FDA made a catastrophic change. They created a voluntary GRAS notification system. This change was the origins of what is known today as the GRAS loophole. This allowed a company to hire its own experts to conduct safety reviews to determine if a substance was GRAS. The company could then voluntarily notify the FDA of its findings. The FDA could respond, but it wasn't required to. Think about that. A company that stands to make billions of dollars from a new ingredient is allowed to hire its own people to say, "Don't worry, this is safe." This is not an independent review. This is an industry self-regulation, and it creates an immediate and massive conflict of interest. On a side note, I'm going to guess that if you examine the politics of the time and you really dug deep into campaign donations and lobbyist groups, there are breadcrumbs that you can follow to determine the reasons behind this decision, but that's for another day. The GRAS process is not just a loophole, it's a system designed for a lack of oversight. Let's dig into some of the most corrupting influences. First, the revolving door conflicts of interest. Much like the pharmaceutical industry, the expert panels who make these GRAS determinations are often handpicked and paid by the very companies whose ingredients they're evaluating. Furthermore, many of these experts have a history of working for the food industry. There's a classic in and out, back and forth type of thing where individuals move between the industry and regulatory roles, blurring the lines of impartiality. Second, with GRAS, in addition to the regulation itself being regarded as a loophole, there is an even more concerning loophole. It's contained within the regulation itself, the GRAS withdrawal loophole. This is perhaps the most shocking part of the GRAS process. If the FDA does decide to respond to a GRAS notification and begins asking tough questions about safety, the company can simply withdraw its notification at any time. Once withdrawn, the company can proceed with using the ingredient without any FDA oversight. There's nothing the FDA can do. The public doesn't even know this happened, and the ingredient is still on the market. Third, the failure to consider cumulative effects. The FDA rarely, if ever, considers cumulative effects of multiple chemical exposures from food and other sources. We are not eating a single ingredient. We're eating a food with dozens of additives, and we're exposed to thousands of chemicals from our environment. The GRAS process is siloed ingredient by ingredient review that ignores the bigger picture. For example, citizen petitions have been filed asking the FDA to reconsider the safety of certain chemicals, such as phthalates in food packaging. The FDA's own analysis in one case was a perfect demonstration of their blind spot. They failed to consider how abrasion from a substance in a food package could leach chemicals into the food itself. This isn't just a mistake, it's a systemic failure to account for real-world conditions. The lack of oversight gets even more opaque when we talk about flavorings. FEMA stands for the Flavor and Extract Manufacturers Association, which has its own expert panel that makes GRAS conclusions for flavor substances. First, to have this discussion, let's review some terminology. In an FDA-regulated industry, the term black box refers to a warning placed on a prescription drug's label to alert healthcare providers and patients about serious or life-threatening side effects. It is the strictest and most prominent warning the FDA can acquire for a medical product. While the term black box is used, the term originates from the fact that this is a special warning that's enclosed in a literal box that's black with a border on the medication's package insert, promotional materials, and other labeling. The black border is intended to make the warning stand out and capture the immediate attention of anyone handling the drug information. This term, though, as we're using it here, has a different meaning. The term black box is also used to describe the lack of transparency and public access to the scientific data and rationale behind government agency decisions. How it works: FEMA is a trade association funded by its member companies. The Center for Science and the Public Interest, a consumer advocacy group, has rightfully criticized this system as a black box. FEMA's public stance is that they have a strict conflict of interest policy and that panel members are kept unaware of the identity of the company submitting the application. But critics argue that the inherent financial connection between FEMA and its paying members creates a strong incentive for favorable outcomes. Why does this matter? Because the proprietary information and lack of transparency, that's why. The secret formulations and unpublished studies used in these evaluations make it nearly impossible for the broader scientific community or the public to scrutinize the safety decisions. It's a self-regulated system with no outside accountability. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. My own personal journey with the carnivore diet exposed my bias and flawed logic in a way no textbook could ever do. After I adopted an animal-based diet and healed all of my medical conditions, I started to notice not just food additives listed on labels, but I also started to see the world of produce and plants in general in a whole new light. Plants are made up of an enormous array of compounds and defense chemicals, too numerous to even count. Many people forget this. In fact, many powerful medications were invented due to the discovery and extraction of compounds found in plants. Let's look at a few examples. Bromelain and calcium oxalate crystals. When you eat fresh pineapple, you sometimes get a tingling or a burning sensation in your mouth. That's because the bromelain enzyme and tiny needle-like calcium oxalate crystals are breaking down the protective mucus layer in your mouth. It's eating you. Amygdalin is a naturally occurring plant compound called a cyanogenic glycoside, which can release toxic cyanide when broken down by enzymes. It's found in the kernels, seeds, and pits of several fruits, including apricots, peaches, plums, and apples, as well as in bitter almonds. Other examples include cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage, glucosinolates, spinach, oxalic acid, legumes, lectins, citrus, cyanogenic glycosides, and tomatoes and potatoes, glycoalkaloids. These chemicals, referred to as anti-nutrients, protect plants from pests and herbivores and can affect human health and cause inflammation. Throughout history, humans have learned preparation techniques that assisted in decreasing the harmful compounds, boiling, peeling, deseeding, etc. But the fact remains, these foods caused rampant inflammation in my body, inflammation that disappeared once I stopped consuming them. Yet, because many do not feel discomfort after consumption or do not recognize mild inflammation, they don't see it. They don't know their baseline because they're on the standard American diet, so to them, they're always inflamed and it feels like normal. My personal experience showed me that removing both food additives as well as these naturally occurring plant defense chemicals was the key to my true healing. As a chemist, it made perfect sense, and I just couldn't believe it took so long for me to figure it out. My body was no longer burdened by the constant assault of chemicals, binders, emulsifiers, preservatives, all of which it was never designed to process. The food industry loves to use these additives to improve shelf life, appearance, and taste. Here's a quick breakdown of some of the most common ones and their purpose. BHA, BHT, butylated hydroxyanisole, butylated hydroxytoluene. These are antioxidants used to prevent rancidity in fats. They are also on the GRAS list. However, they have been banned in some countries and are linked to various health concerns in animal studies. Carrageenan, sourced from seaweed, it's a binder and a thickener. While natural, it has been linked to digestive issues and inflammation in some people. Sodium nitrite, used to cure meat like hot dogs and bacon. It's a color fixative and it helps prevent the growth of harmful bacteria, allegedly, but it can form cancer-causing nitrosamines when cooked at high temperatures. MSG, monosodium glutamate, a flavor enhancer. While GRAS, many people experience symptoms like headaches and flushing after consumption. Corn syrup, a sweetener and flavoring agent. It's a key ingredient in many processed foods, and we all know the health issues associated with excessive sugar consumption. Hydrolyzed proteins, flavor enhancers made from plant or animal sources. The body often has difficulty with these highly processed fragmented proteins. Food starches. Used as thickeners and binders, they are often chemically modified. While the source is not required on the label, it's often corn or wheat, which can be an issue for people with allergies or sensitivities. The truth is, all of these additives serve a purpose for the food manufacturer, but that purpose never serves your long-term health. They are there to make food cheaper, last longer, and taste more palatable. My experience showed me that my body didn't need any of them. It needed only meat and eggs and dairy when I feel the urge. The FDA's system for food additives is a relic. The law was written in 1958 and the corrupt loophole was added in 1997. It doesn't account for the modern processed and chemically saturated food supply we have today either. There are calls for reform. Some lawmakers are pushing to eliminate the GRAS loophole entirely and mandate pre-market approval for all new additives. But this will be an uphill battle as the food and chemical industries have powerful lobbies. My journey showed me that relying on a broken system for my health was a mistake. So what can you do? Well, first of all, read the labels. The ingredients are listed in order of weight, from greatest to least. If the list is a mile long and filled with chemicals that you can't pronounce, it's not a good sign. Number 2, focus on whole foods. The foods that truly nourish us, meat, eggs, and if you just can't bear to part with your veggies and fruits, stick with whole foods there too. And do your research into what defense chemicals you may be ingesting, as some plants are more harmful than others. Number 3, support reform. If you're concerned about the integrity of our food supply, support organizations and political efforts that are pushing to close the GRAS loophole and improve oversight. My personal story is a testament to the fact that you can heal your body by giving it what it is designed to consume and by removing the ingredients that are a burden to it. My professional experience confirms that the system designed to protect you is deeply flawed and is not working in your best interest. This isn't about scare tactics. This is about empowerment. It's about giving you the knowledge to make informed decisions and take back control of your health. Thanks so much for watching, and leave a comment on what you've learned on your own personal food journey. And if you liked the video, if you could leave me a like, I would really appreciate it. And if you would like to, subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.